temptations, right?
That's the sign that we're about to hit something good, right? Thank God.
Thank God.
Thank God.
Well, welcome, Father Turbo.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So what are we talking about today?
Boy, well, I think the one thing I definitely want to start with, we were just talking about this backstage, quote unquote, but, the value of this platform and this medium really comes from us, coming from a place of, discovery, humility, and everyone's going to roll their eyes and feel cringy when I say this, but vulnerability. And I think that's important because if you understand, like, let's think about this for a second, the medium in regards of its digital, electronic, we are not in person. The things that generally facilitate fellowship, koinonia, those things are reduced to a large degree, just by proxy of not being present with each other. So I think this is where a greater measure of vulnerability is needed in order for these conversations to have value, because the in-person / personal aspect of it is so reduced because we are talking from a distance and through a screen and all these things. So entering into that space of vulnerability looks like not being in the seat of, the high priest, and I don't mean, I mean in the Old Testament sense, or the, the kind of Pharisaical sense like we were just talking about. I don't ever come as necessarily the know-it-all, here's everything, blah, blah, blah. It's really coming in the sense of, sharing personal experience. That's part of the vulnerability. Looking for God, looking for those points of truth, just like everyone else, and I think that's where the difference between having a conversation that is edifying and things are revealed versus, someone just kind of sitting up and then just giving a bunch of information that they could just look up on Google or open up a book, that there's, I don't know, I don't see the value in it, but I do see value in this. And I think that's where also getting into what we're going to talk about is touching on things that can only really be touched on in conversation, because part of the problem is when we start talking about certain things, whether it's going to be, gender issues, feminism, transgender, what do we do about that? Spiritual warfare, addictions, marriage, all these things. There is a, the church has her canons, the church has her dogmas, but the reality is that, we're Orthodox. And what that means is in fact, we have to be very careful about the rigidity of approach that people sometimes wield, out of a moralism and out of a fear. And they're more energized by winning a culture war or fighting a culture war, or they're more energized by these things versus the freedom and the liberty that Christ is seeking to bring people. That they're not motivated by that. They're motivated with, kind of goose stepping in line in a religious sense. And that's problematic because that Christ isn't present there. The emphasis, and I get it, it's krivia and economia. And the krivia is so important, but the krivia is the standard is there not to keep people in line, but to keep people alive. Right?
That's right.
There's a big difference,
Right. I've heard that the commandments are given to us for life. They're not like rules to put us under subjugation. It's like, if you want to live, here's what you do.
That's right. And so when that's missing, because again, and I say this out of, love, but what people miss sometimes, I think, is that, the motivation with, like, again, let's just say culture war. And that's like, we're in the midst of it, right? Mm-hmm. It's even the well-intended, right? Meaning, hey, we got to push back on all these terrible things happening in the country. And I agree, but it's when it's motivated out of fear, anytime you're motivated out of fear, of failure, fear of infection, fear of these things, versus the fear of the Lord, you're going to have problems. And that's where a lot of missteps happen on the right. And so I think these conversations are important because they can really only be had in that context that is personal, right? And there's a danger in that. And part of that danger is what basically gets experienced as humility, right? Because, and the trust of God, because the danger of, am I making a misstep, right? Am I going to say something out of line? That's a pathway towards humility. And the reason for that is, if you're worried about making a misstep, that's good. It keeps you on your toes. You don't just start flinging opinions like you're, like you're the patriarch, right? But on the other hand, another way that it preserves not just humility, but it preserves the greater potential to see what God is revealing about a certain situation, is that it keeps you from being so focused on yourself. And I think that's one of the big things that happens when people are just so focused on looking like a fool or being making the mistake. They lose sight of the actual topic itself, the actual issue itself, and the person who's being affected. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
And when you're not looking at that other person, you're inherently, in this case, looking at yourself in the wrong way. This isn't about what we're talking about, because this isn't self-accusation. Because self-accusation, which is, a spiritual practice, a neptic practice, is beneficial. Self-accusation, though, isn't self-obsession. Self-accusation isn't vanity in regards of, looking to make sure that, self-accusation is really examining yourself for places of pride, places of error, places of the kind of, vain privilege that we afford ourselves in conversations, versus the kind of self-obsession of, I kind of know I'm right, but I just want to present I want to make sure that my presentation is good. That's not self-accusation. But when those things are in play, God shows up. And I think that's also important. And I'll kind of shut up maybe, but I think that's important too, because the reality of it is, as you know, I'm in this space and I'm trying to do what I can, like synaxis and just being present, even though I wasn't before, because I was at one point being like, quasi-Luddite, no internet, no YouTube. And then I realized this is foolishness. It's like, you're cutting your nose to spite your face. The reality is, you know what I'm saying? So, I think the thing that we need to do is just realize any thought that says God can't even use this is problematic. And so what I'm trying to get at, to close on this, we see that God will use this medium. God will try to meet people anywhere that they're willing to be met, and he'll try to reach out and meet people any way that he can until everything's done. And we need to really have that understanding, because when we don't, we begin to close ourselves off out of fear, out of the self-preservation that isn't Christian. And that self-preservation is not honoring God. Is this making sense how I'm saying it?
I've had this exact conversation with my own spiritual father about my channel, because going back to something you said in the beginning, even though I don't consider myself an expert, I'm just an Orthodox wife, mother, homeschooler, all these things, adding my perspective to this conversation. The main criticism I get is that I am acting like, someone with authority. And I don't claim that. I never claim that. I just have perspective, not authority. So that's one thing. But I've gone back and forth with my father confessor about, it is hard to put yourself online and to expose yourself, to the criticism, which at times has been pretty rough. And for me, I've only been on the internet for a few years, actually, like just as a user even. So this is all kind of new to me in terms of the aggressive nature and sometimes the hateful nature of even people in the church. It's been really shocking. So I'm like going from the parish into chat rooms, and it's like, what is going on here? Really shocking. And so I've had this conversation with him about, I'm willing to be exposed for the person that I am, which is pretty lame and, not at all stable in my spiritual life. If it helps people, and I get the messages that it does help people, the conversations we have. So I'm willing to do it, but it's a really hard space to be in. And I am too sensitive. I get that. So I take it for my salvation that these criticisms I get, thank God.
Thank God.
Gives me a little bit of thick skin. It's growing thicker. So
Thank God. Thank God.
But it's really hard. It's hard to expose yourself like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have a vision for it, then that's where it's really problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think having the vision for, and the vision's given, a vision isn't created, right? That's a key thing to understand. And so having a vision for, how and who, how you can be used and who you can be used for, who you can be helpful to is really important. Because again, like one of the things we're talking about, and I think this is a great place to start too, is just, people, with the great harvest that we're in the midst of. And one of the conversations, I don't think you and I had it. I know you've had the conversation about where are the women, and I think that part of that is that there are women there and there are women that are going to come. But women, and there's others who, need to come, because part of the problem with this equation, or the way that people are looking at it, is I think people really do see Orthodoxy as a denomination. And when I say people, I'm not talking about people outside of Orthodoxy. I'm talking about people within Orthodoxy. I think people really see Orthodoxy as a denomination. And just so we're all clear, I'm not talking about people who are, who would be categorized, rightly or wrongly, but nevertheless categorized as on the kind of more liberal spectrum. I'm talking about people who see themselves as traditionalists and people who see themselves as conservatives. I think that they would never acknowledge that, but in their disposition, they don't realize that they're seeing Orthodoxy as a denomination. They see Orthodoxy as the denomination for those who get it, for those who fall in line with the correct conservative political values, those who fall in line with the kind of correct conservative religious ecclesiastical dispositions, right? And they see it as like, well, those who get it, those are the ones who are going to get in. And forgive me, but that's like seeing Orthodoxy as a denomination. Because the reality of it is the only way to understand Orthodoxy is to understand that it is all the things that she claims she is. She is the great ark. She is the great hospital. She is the Father's house also. She is the Father's house where both the older brother and the prodigal are put before the Father. And this is really key, because we have to remember that the older brother is just as much in that parable as the prodigal. And the question is, do you read that parable and see, the older brother at the table or not? Right. And so the older brother, oftentimes you can understand that perhaps, and I think this is one of the things about the parable and the power, the mystery and the wisdom of the Lord providing that parable for us, is there is no hard resolution. We know that the prodigal is at the table of the feast. We know he is. But the question is the older brother, you see. It's left open. And I think that's providential, because at that point is, where will you be? That's the presentation to those who would hear it and miss the fact that they are the older brother. Will you be at the feast or not? And I think that the feast is only for those who know they need the love and the nourishment, not just of the fatted calf, but of the embrace of the Father. And I think too many people miss that because, one of the things you and I were just talking about specifically is, guys, we are going to, if, unless the Lord tarries, whatever, we're going to start seeing, and I'm using this word very specifically, more people coming who have been wounded and disfigured metaphorically and literally with like the transgender movement. We're going to see them.
Mm-hmm.
I've already seen them. See, that's the key, is it's not a speculation. I've already seen them. I've already seen people who have come in and they're trying to make sense of things, and it's happening. What are we going to do? If you see and you fear that, the church is going to be tarnished, then you don't understand. And then you don't understand that, like, who the church is. And ultimately you're seeing her as a denomination. That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
You don't understand that. That's when St. Paul says to Timothy about in the last days, when he gives that whole litany of the things of the last days, everyone wants to think about, again, the crack smoking 500-pound, black lesbian. That's exactly who they are. But I'm like, no, those people all in that litany of passions, we are a part of that, because those who have the form of godliness but deny the power thereof, what do you think that means? So when we have the form of all the things that would facilitate the transformation, the transfiguration of the human soul out of brokenness, out of darkness, out of deformity, and into light, and into wholeness, and into, dignity, that only happens in Orthodoxy, not because of some external doctrinal claims, but because Christ gives himself fully to those here in his body. Can I go all over for?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Forgive me. I had mentioned this not too long ago, and I want to mention it here again for people to understand, because as we see people of prominence who are starting in good intention, wanting to make claims, we have to be careful. And I think this is where, from my experience, certain things need to be laid out, because the blurring of the lines will actually water down the medicine of Holy Orthodoxy. And here's why. God has everybody. God has everyone, right? And God has the Muslim, God has the Jew, God has the Buddhist, God has the Satanist, God has the atheist. He has all of them. But only those within the church have God. And that's a hard thing for people to hear. And I think it's because people conflate what it means to have God. See, God is working with everyone, but God only gives himself to those who are bearing the image and the likeness. And so that vulnerability that God submits himself to, that is why the need to hold up the claims of the church that are found in our sacramental life. For instance, that sacramental life is the key that enters us into the mystical life, in which the mysteries of Christ offering himself to his people, submitting himself to his people. This may sound foreign to people, because exactly what I'm saying, there's a depth that people very rarely are getting to. And it's not about intellect. It's not about, I read this father. It's about actually walking in that light of suffering for the sake of Christ. And you begin to see, you won't know this unless you've had those failures. You won't know this unless you've been at that crucible where you see the enemy having victories in battles. And people don't want to acknowledge this. Christ has won the war, but there are battles and skirmishes that are happening. And when you see people, suicides, of people being swept up with the all the temptations in this world, including clergy, the temptation to despair is so strong. But when you don't despair, this is where you begin to have your eyes open to what I'm talking about. and you see the mystery of Christ being, his canonic work is still happening. He's still emptying himself out, pouring himself out for us, and making himself vulnerable to us, submitting himself to people who would otherwise still kind of put him to the cross. This is the mystery, the icon of the unexpected joy. There's a man, I think he's a thief, and every day, he's an Orthodox Christian. Every day he goes out and he says his prayers, makes the sign of the cross, whatever, before the icon, the Mother of God, and he goes out and he steals. He goes out and he does his sins every day. He does this for years, and then one day he does the same thing. He does his perfunctory prayers, and he sees that the Mother of God is alive. It begins to speak to him and holding up the Christ, and he's bleeding. His wounds are bleeding. And she says, essentially, every time you go out and you continue to commit these sins in the light of knowing my son and all his sacrifice from you wound him again, over again. And in this, he's absolutely mortified, and he falls down. He begins to confess, and he ends in repentance. So the icon of the unexpected joy, this is what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. In that experience, you see, and as a priest and as a mother, or as a father, as a parent, we all know that not only for ourselves, but even for our children or for our godchildren, we see how we commit sins knowingly. Yeah. And we still enter into trying, and we submit Christ to that. That's what I'm talking about in regards of the vulnerability of Christ that is only experienced in the Orthodox Church. And that's not about, again, when people hear that, and so many people, this is one thing, so many people get triggered when they hear this. There's converts who come in and like their wives or their husbands are like, these Orthodox seem so arrogant. And we are, and all that stuff. But the thing that they're sensing a boundary. And that boundary is a good thing, actually. We need to maintain it, because it's the boundary of a husband saying, this is my beloved, and a wife saying, this is my beloved. It's not a boundary of, you can't come in here because you're not smart enough, you're not holy enough. Mm-hmm. It's the boundary of, I give myself to those who are here. You see what I'm saying? And that's, I think, what we need to really maintain, because Christ deserves the fruit of his sufferings. And so all these people, occultists, New Agers, people, transgenders, all these people, Christ doesn't want one single soul to enter into hell. Mm-hmm. And so we need to get on that plan, and we're not.
100%. We shouldn't be gloating about people and their sins. I see that all the time, and it drives me crazy. But, when you're talking about Christ self-emptying, I was recently, a couple of years ago, I went through a pretty big and extended struggle, and I didn't struggle well. In retrospect, I look at it, and I was thinking about this, that, as things are happening, and I didn't lean in, here's the rules and here's how things should work, and trying to assert some, boundaries or whatever. And then I look at Christ, and it's like he calls us to suffer even to the shedding of our blood. It's like, you have not yet suffered to the shedding of your blood. It's like, okay, I was nowhere near that. I was hurt emotionally, right? Like, just nowhere near what Christ calls us to my shame, right? Like, I should have. In retrospect, I see that now, like, accepted all of that suffering. And I believe if I would have done that, the situation, less people in the situation would have been hurt if I had chosen to do that. But I didn't. I chose to do the correct things. And here's the boundaries that we should have, and the rules and things. And that wasn't, I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough because, and maybe this is where we go next. All the questions, there's that, Metropolitan Atheos has this wonderful book, the Illness and the Cure of the Soul. And one of the things that's great about it's a great primer. I suggest it to everybody, but there's these, questions that are presented, in regards of, well, what about this? What about that? And there's other, there's actual fathers who have done the same thing. And I love that, because addressing those kind of questions and those, the pushback, I think that's one of those places where we thrive, because to your point here, the reality of, that situation that you're laying out, someone would say, well, we have to do this, we have to do that, because if we don't, everything will fall apart, and this and that's. Like, okay, where's Christ?
Exactly.
Like honestly, and not just in the sense of, where's the gentle mercy? No. Like, okay, traditionalist, where's Christos Victus? Right? Where is the Christ who is bearing the sword? Like, he's banished in that too. You don't really have the faith in his strength. You don't really have the faith in his ability to take on these things and to deal with them. This is why we need to bring people in, because it's in the annals of the ark, and in him, and people having the access to partake of his emptying of himself, that they enter into the holy shame. And that's what heals them. See, this is the key people miss out on, because they avoid the pain. They avoid the cross, is that it's actually in entering into the holy shame of his submission of himself to you that you actually find healing. I know this is a complex or even like mysterious thing that I'm speaking of, but I'm telling you, that's where people find repentance, and that's where they find actual salvation. People think that people find salvation by adhering to moral doctrines and dogmas, and they don't. Adhering to those things puts you on the path, but ultimately it's facing the Christ naked and in his shame willingly for you, that you're healed. This is St. Paisios talking about, the judgment, and Christ just, God's just sitting there. It's that loving gaze. It's not the wagging of the finger. There was, forgive me, it's something I relayed. I can't remember where, but it's important. I want to bring this up again. There's this incredible video of this serial killer who, obviously killed a lot of, I'm presuming young girls, unfortunately. And in this is in the 80s. And in this video, there's this women, 2 or 3 of the mothers, the mothers of the victims. And they're just like, I wish he'd burn in hell. I wish he gets a slow, painful death. You probably have seen this,
I saw that. Yeah.
And the one man stands up and says, I forgive you. And that serial killer is hardened. The more that the women, not just that it's women, but the more that he's getting accusations, and he's just like, you deserve death. He's just hardened. Little side note. That's why when people teach you, or not you specifically, but when people teach us about universalism and about, like everyone's going to cut, it's like, no, because what people don't understand is the reason why the hell is eternal is because you can see it right there in that man. They don't understand the strength of the human will, because that's something that God had given us. And so you see it right there. He's hard. He's getting harder and harder the more that people are like cursing him and damning him. And the only thing that broke him is that man offering him forgiveness. Boom. He begins to soften it and begins to tremble and weep. This is the Christ. Like you literally see salvation begin to happen. This is the Christ. And people, when they think that they're entering in and they're getting, the great moral standards, and this is they don't understand that they're taking a sheet and they're basically covering the Lord on the cross and saying, don't look at that. Look at this clean sheet. And if you just do that, it's like, there's no salvation in that. The salvation comes in facing his shame, because it's in his shame that you now see yours. And you are mortified that he who is the only innocent one would dare to do this and to still offer you love. You see that?
Yeah. When you begin to see the depth of your own sinfulness, I mean, you just have no room to judge anybody. It just goes out the window. It's like, how can I judge these people who are, not living well or doing all kinds of terrible things, but I know better and I'm still sinning, right? And I have everything laid out for me. There's nothing God has withheld for my salvation. And I'm still knowingly. I remember the first time I read the word knowingly in the prayers for communion, and it really hit me like, oh, not just like, oops, Lord, sorry, these are the things I accidentally did. No, knowingly sinning. Like we have just nowhere to judge other people. I mean, I'm a piece of trash. I really am. Like, if you really knew my heart and like everything that God has given me that I didn't take advantage of, I have no excuse for what I do.
God help us.
Yeah.
God help us. So there's my diatribe.
Not at all what we were going to talk about today, but that's okay. It's really needed. It scares me what I see online. And when I had mentioned speaking about transgenderism earlier, it's not that I don't fear them coming to church. I fear the church's response to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a situation. I've had, like I said, like a few, already. I've had both. I've experienced those who are repenting, meaning that they're detransitioning and they're trying. I've experienced that. And I've also experienced those who are, still, on the cusp, potentially one way or the other, like either continuing to double down, harden their hearts, or to submit themselves. And it's tough because for me, the thing that I've seen, and this is just me, I could be wrong, but for me, it's about actually being very prayerful for each case individually. Like when I've tried to attempt to have some sort of like protocol, what I have found is there's often something lacking. Because you're dealing with a unique human person, even though the reality of the malady in which their soul's afflicted with has shared symptoms, the response to medicine and treatment and therapy is not going to be the same. And this is part of the problem when people want to enter into these things, talk about these things, discuss these things, and teach on these things without the proper experience. And what I mean by proper experience is, what's your success? Because people have experience, but it's just like they keep blowing it. And they think like, well, nothing can be done about it. And so therefore, this is what it is. It's like, no, it's just, you have experience, but you're blowing it. And you're blowing it because you're not doing what we were just talking about. And I'm the reason why I'm speaking now about this is because I have some experience at this point. And, it's not all victories, but it's not all losses either. And what I found the key is being first and foremost, submitting myself to God in prayer. And this is not cheesy. This is not the kind of default answer. It really is like agonizing and being like, God, I don't have wisdom on this. There's so much here I can't see about this person. And it's really for me, the fear of God. And the fear of God is I'm not worried about what people are going to say and think. But I am worried about what's going to happen to, I hate to use the term, but like kind of collateral damage. And what that means is you're never just dealing with an individual. You're dealing with a community. And that community is first and foremost your flock, speaking as a priest or as a parent, right? Mm-hmm. But then you're also dealing with the kind of periphery community of that person, that soul, and then who they're involved with. And this isn't about, again, worrying of in a vain way about what people are going to think, but it is worrying about in a Christian way. Because we do want to have the right rapport in as much as it's possible with those who are on the outside. Why? Not so that we could keep our tax exemption, not that we would, have other, kind of people that we respect and love, Presbyterians, whatever, think that we're on the right side. But that, God forbid, the Christ is hidden, right? Mm-hmm. People people need to know that the church is a place where they can actually be healed of their sins. And so I do agonize over that a bit. Because people who are coming from this issue, there's so many things working against them on every level, a somatic level, the body, a psychological level, and a spiritual level. They've been, disfigured on every facet, ontologically, every ontological facet, And so because of that, the danger of just resting on the moralistic level is so high in regards of failure, in regards of that person's soul sustaining even further wounds. I mean, imagine, I put it like this. You come to the doctor after a prolonged chronic illness, right? And you've all but depleted your resources, not just your material resources to see another doctor, but your physical and psychological and spiritual stamina. People do come to breaking points, right? Well, if you're the last doc, if you're like the surgeon, then it's like, well, we've all given up hope, but let's go see Dr. Strange, whatever. It's like, if you're not careful and you're not, you're just resting in what you perceive to be your strengths, you very well, God forbid, and may God help us, you very well could be that death knell, that death blow for that person's soul. And that does happen. And that's part of that's the terror of being a priest. Sometimes it's the terror of being a parent, is that, people don't want to hear this. And again, I don't want to seem like I see, if you're tracking with me, you could feel there's a measure of contradiction here. But it's a paradox in the sense that, yes, Christ is in control of everything, and it's ultimately him that makes the final decision. And so I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe that Christ alone is the judge. But I also know this. I also know that Christ vests parents, spiritual and biological parents, with a measure of responsibility. I know that also. And I know that responsibility is real. And I know that this life is not a game or a simulation. And I know that when people enter into the dangerous, and danger isn't a bad thing per se, but that dangerous space in which I have to use this word again, vulnerable space, where they're exposing themselves out of hope of gaining some measure of light, when the person who is on the other end of that does not reciprocate, this is where that cauterizing of the heart happens. When someone exposes themselves and says, look, this is really kind of where I'm at. And the person on the other end is just looking for, a notch on the belt. They're not looking to really open themselves up and allow that person to enter in. It's like, the danger of their person losing their soul is so high. It's so high, and I've seen it. And that's where people end up in the despair of suicide. I'm just telling you. And I'll say this too, because all this in this context is transgender, right? But there's other sins. People need to understand suicide isn't just the shocking, kind of high impact of, I'm taking my life right now. Suicide can be drawn out. People can enter into a place of despair and sustained despair, and their cowardice, thank God, their cowardice can keep them from, the immediate of like, I'm taking my life right now. I'm jumping off the bridge, or, hanging myself. The cowardice can keep them from that, but they instead give themselves over to, a despond. It's almost like death by exposure, spiritually, psychologically speaking, right? And their intention is the same, but they just don't have they don't have the measure of violence in them to end it right now. But it's still suicide, right? And so people don't recognize it as such, and so they don't tend it as such, and they just think, well, go on your way, it'll figure out. But it's like that person, instead of jumping headlong into hell, they slowly crawl into it. Either way, they end up in this. They end up in the place of shadow and flame. And so,
And yeah, forgive me, but I think that's where the co-vulnerability is so important, because the person I know the best that did commit suicide and was Orthodox, there was kind of a slow decline of his life over time, over a few years, from almost picturesque Orthodox life to blowing the whole thing up, his family life and everything. And I think too, there's probably a lot of pride in that, of like, rejecting of the humility to say, I have totally blown up my life. Like we've done that. A lot of us have done that. And you have to have the humility to say, I've blown up my life. And then the hope in God to say, but he can still resurrect something out of that. He can still resurrect you in the midst of all that. Yeah. And when people hide it, because, they're ashamed of it, that can't happen. And I feel like that's kind of what happened with this young man, is it was very hidden.
Yeah. 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 And there's another side of it too. And I hate to go there, but I feel like I need to. Because I feel strongly about this, and that people need to be aware of it. There's this space where, St. Simeon the theologian, he speaks about, if you don't encounter the grace of God here and now, you don't taste the resurrection life of God now, you won't in the future age. Right? Mm-hmm. And so this is very much a part of this, and like what you're saying, but there's another side of which I have found. And that is, people actually don't believe in the resurrection of the dead either. They don't.
You mean they don't intellectually believe it, or they don't live like they believe it, or both?
Both. We assent to it. We confess it in the creed. Mm-hmm. But let's say just, I don't know this poor, unfortunate soul you're speaking about, but I would just use this as an example. There's some times when I'm not able to look someone and say, with honesty and conviction, you can taste a measure of resurrection here in this life. There's times when I look and I go like, your time here, the rest of your time here might be hell. But the question is if you endure that hell with faith, this is Silouan, keep thy mind in hell, but despair not. And what that is it isn't just a kind of psychological game you play. Sometimes your life is as such. The question is for you then, at that point, is, will you have faith? Will you allow this to inculcate in you something that many don't have, which is, I actually am going to live and hope for the resurrection of the dead. That even though this is the three holy youth, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I mean. This spirituality isn't just Silouan, it's the three holy youths. Yeah. Yea, even if he doesn't deliver us, we will still believe. Many people do not have that. And that is the core danger for those who are on the right. Because for them, everything isn't about winning here and now. That's that neo-Chiliasm. Mm-hmm. I have to win here and now. Whatever this battle is, I have to win here and now. Because that essentially begins to undermine what I would submit as the deeper thing of, yea, even though I'm slayed, right? This is Job. This is the three holy youths. We'll still believe even if we're not delivered from the furnace. Mm-hmm. For many people, that is what they need to enter into. Versus, not that you or anyone does anything wrong by trying to present to them a hope for some sort of, resurrection of their social, spiritual life here in this world. That's hopeful. But there are some people where it's better to say to them, because yes, God can work any miracle, but maybe perhaps the greater miracle is them holding to hope against hope, and being in the space where, I may, I'll give you an example.
But that sounds like the resurrected life to me. Like that, to me, that is the that is the resurrected.
It is.
Standing on the edge of hell, and despairing not.
I agree. But to be clear, what I'm talking about is there are times where people, I've had this experience. I knew a family where, and it was to the fault of the husband, right? The Orthodox family, the wife, she ends up leaving, right? We would pray akathis. We were doing multiple akathis a day, all this and this, that, And she still left. And the family still fell apart. And he fell apart and he's fallen apart, right? This is what I'm talking about. And so the thing is, the hope that if I do X, Y, and Z, God's going to pull this out.
Mm-hmm.
Plane is diving. If I just, there's at some point, last minute, he's going to pull it out. We're going to be married again. And you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I do. Yeah.
And
this is,
yeah.
Yeah, forgive me. This is what Matushka and I were talking about in our marriage and monasticism talk. One thing we talked about was making your family an idol. That's what that is. You have to love Christ above your family. And it's like, I'm kind of almost an empty nester now. That life that I had for a long time, which I loved, in a sense, has fallen apart and it's not what I thought it would be at this point in my life. But you have to, it's a gentle struggle. It's not a terrible struggle, but you have to reorientate always. Like, family life is wonderful, but it's not the idol. It's like Christ is who we worship. We don't worship these, these morals or these good living practices that we have.
No.
It's always about Christ.
It's always about Christ. And I'll tell you just like in my own life, right? I've had these moments, right? Like, my parents have been gone for a long time. Like my children essentially have grown up without grandparents on my end.
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted that for them because I didn't have that, I had that experience of not having, I didn't want that, but that's what they have, chronic pain, I'm grateful for it. Don't get me wrong. Don't anyone mistake it otherwise. I say it with joy, right? But I'm just sharing with it because I want someone to be, hopefully blessed by it. I'm in chronic pain all day, every day. And I am formally a cripple. Like I don't have any illusions otherwise now. It's even painful to say it public like that, but I'm not complaining. It's just like, that's that moment where it's like, maybe, please God. It's like, no, like I'm going to, does that mean I'm going to just start stuffing myself with pizza or whatever? No, that's part of the thing is, I'm more active now physically than when I was before my accident. But I also recognize I have to do it now so that I don't get worse versus getting better. I'm not going to get better. You know what I mean? And so, God can do whatever, but these are little snapshots of what I'm talking about in regards of like, oh God, if I just do this, if I can maybe just do one more act of this, or maybe if I give alms, like my hope is in the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. Amen. And really, you can't really say that with that purifying tear, unless you've had those experiences, I think. And I think that's what we all will have. It rains on the just and the unjust alike. We're all going to have these moments. But the thing is those of us who are receiving Christ's suffering and seeking to unite our sufferings to Christ, that's what this looks like versus the kind of despair, and the whole world's in despair, isn't it? I mean, It doesn't look like, the taking of a life per se. But everything we see is the fruit of despair and the nihilism. It's like, well, it means nothing. So grab for anything that you can,
We're all going to suffer, but in Orthodoxy, we learn how to suffer with the Lord. And there's this really beautiful part in the life of Saint Sophia and her children where I always thought she was martyred with her children, but she wasn't, which to me is even more after. Well, no, she's not martyred, but she dies after in peace.
Her heart breaks. She gives her heart to the Lord,
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, I don't know, I just felt like that was even harder to watch your own kids suffer and to go home and see all their things around the house. She didn't know she was going to die, right? But she's encouraging each of her children in martyrdom before they go. And she makes a statement about, your flesh will be torn apart and all of this stuff, but those wounds will shine like the stars of heaven in the afterlife. And I feel like we don't talk about that enough, that we're so focused on this world. It's like, this world is short. Like some of us are halfway done at least. And the world doesn't ever give us a vision of the afterlife, a proper one at least, right? But these wounds that you suffer for Christ will be stars that shine in heaven or jewels in your crown. Like, this is real. We actually believe this. Maybe we should live it. Live like we believe it, you know?
Right. Right. And I would submit, I guess that's the thing I'm saying is like, we don't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where people are misstepping. I said something a couple of years ago that, I think to this day is still misunderstood. But you know what? I hold to it even more so now. And it's a bit of a political statement, but I don't mean it as a political statement. There's the priest, the Orthodox Christian, the man, the human being. I think that, some of the things that people are so worried about with, like if Kamala Harris had won,
Mm-hmm.
I think we'd be in such a better place spiritually, because the thought was, things were going to, kind of continue. And I'm like, yes, they were, but we would have seen more people turning away and more people looking for healing and more people looking for light. And I think that the idea that these wounds will shine forever like stars in the heaven, that truth is obfuscated when we begin to say, no, I need to have mine here and now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very powerful thing, I think, because, one of the things that I've been thinking about, I was looking at it last night, I was unaware of it. I knew things were happening in Nigeria, but I wasn't aware to the degree in which, there's all this Christian persecution that's happening in Nigeria. And I thought to myself, wow, who here sees God's mercy? Who here sees that Christ is showing himself, not just to those Christians who are being martyred, but this is Christ bearing witness to those who are doing the martyrdom. See, no one thinks that way. Mm-hmm. The idea is just simply like, we need to go over there. We need another crusade. I'm not arguing against that or for that. I'm just saying that when it talks about in the book of Revelation about the authority being given over to them to overcome the saints, why is that authority given? Why do you think? Is it because God is some sort of sadist who enjoys seeing his children being? No. It's because he's revealed to even those who would do the martyrdom, to those who would execute. And that's where I think people struggle seeing this aspect of God, is that, there's the accounts in so many martyrdoms where the martyr willingly gives himself over and the executioner is just beside themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's his victory. That's the victory of how do you win? Christ never forces anyone.
Right.
He never forces anyone. And so how does he do it? That's how he does it. And so many times we find ourselves actually at odds, working against the Lord and working against what he's seeking to do and trying to win the nations. People think him winning the nations is Crusades 3.0. No, we need to bring back Byzantium. It's like, that's not how he's going to win the nation.
Well, we got Byzantium through the martyrs. I'm sorry. Like it was through the martyrs being killed en masse that created the Christian nation in the beginning. It wasn't the Crusades. It was people that died for Christ. That's right. And amazed, stadiums full of people who then jumped in the arena after them. So if we're willing, if we want America to be Orthodox, we'll be willing to die. I don't know. That's actually how it happens.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so before we can offer flesh and bone, we have to offer thought and emotion. Because if you can't offer thought and emotion, you're not going to offer flesh and blood. So, yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Well, is this what you wanted to talk about, or is this a preamble to the other issue of
Go ahead.
Feminism? Well, we've been an hour. I don't want to take up all your time. I know we had a late start, so I just want to be sensitive. But you want to talk about feminism?
Yeah, I mean, I think insofar as, yes, in the sense that everything that we've talked about applies in understanding, because Saint Nikolai Vanorovich, he speaks about inequality and how God uses inequality, and actually God's power and grace is revealed in inequality. It's so profound. It's true. And you know, feminism has robbed women of this profound grace when they engage in this, demonic doctrine. I'll use a hard word to maybe garner some attention. It robs them of the very means of not just repentance, but being brought into the glory and the beauty of what it means to be a woman. I'll say the same thing. When African Americans fall into, the resentment and the envy, and it robs us. It robs them of their falling into becoming what God has intended. And watch this.
Mm-hmm.
As white resentment builds, it's the same trap of feminism. It's the same trap of wokeism. It's identity politics, people. And
Mm-hmm.
the problem is when we say identity politics, that's a dog whistle now. When we say identity politics is a problem, people think, the blacks, the gays, and women, the woke, the liberals, the left. That's what they think. Identity politics is for everybody, Jew and Gentile.
Mm-hmm.
And now with resentment, because the resentment is what hooks people, because there's power in resentment. And so resentment is what has hooked women on feminism. Resentment is what has hooked Black folks on radicalized movements of their various degrees. And resentment is what's hooking, many quote unquote, white Christians now, is resentment. And it's a trap. And I think saying it in this way, hopefully will kind of awaken some minds, because we could talk about feminism as a particular thing there, but I feel like I just wanted to pivot and just get to the core thing, because
Mm-hmm.
identity, this is why, I think sometimes, I know there's some people who roll their eyes at my stance on it, but I hold it, and because it's the only way out. And this is this is another side of what we're talking about in regards of Christ, is like Christ literally is the only way out, because without that, the idol of identity is so strong. And, even if possible, the elect would be deceived.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the problem even too with the growing discussions around Christian nationalism, is that people don't understand what that really looks like. And they want to talk about the Iron Guard and it happened, but it's like, the reality is the resolution of that is found in the saints of the prison. And it's found in those who actually transcended. Transcending doesn't mean rejecting or leaving or negating one's identity. It actually, to transcend it, means to enter into the higher thing. And a lot of people don't understand this. They really don't. For instance, we don't hate steak. We love steak, but we leave it to enter into the transcendence of something higher, right? We don't hate conjugal relations, but we transcend the experience of that for the higher thing in Holy Communion, right? So it's the same thing. A lot of people are stuck in this ideological web, and they want to have their cake and eat it too. And the church says you kind of can't at a certain point, because you kind of can't, have steak and eat as much as you want and fast. You kind of can't have as much conjugal, relations as you want and still have Holy Communion. You can't, right? Not because it's bad, but because this is the higher thing, right? And that subtlety is really important. And I think for so many people, the resentment is the thing. And feminism is so particular in this area, because it's very easy to see all the areas in which the justification of it is really obvious. But that justification, I would say, is just the worm on the hook, right? It can keep you from entering into this deeper thing of the Christ,
Yeah, when you're talking about identity, I mean, there's the really easy false identity that we can see, where we are identifying like with what we wear and what we buy, right? a Nike shirt, or I'm a goth kid, or whatever it is, right? I'm a cheerleader. But we do that as adults and as people who have maybe gotten rid of those identities, but we build an identity of who we think we are, who we want to be, or who we pretend to be. But I mean, doesn't the church say, and the scriptures say, like, who we are is hidden with Christ in God? And that is not something we build. It's something that Christ reveals to us over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about even in the context of family life, right? Orthodox family life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what I have found as a father is that, and again, speaking from experience and not just from all my kids being shiny stars, but like the battles that I have experienced loss in, which are real.
Mm-hmm.
It comes with the forgetting of the corporate identity. So identitarianism is not solved by completely rejecting identity. It's solved and healed by embracing correct identity.
Mm-hmm.
So the identity of the larger self, the larger, expression of self is the problem, right? So, when you, let's say, for instance, the individual, right? The individual becomes obsessed with their own kind of identity. That's their idol, whatever that is, right? I'm a skater. I'm a goth kid. I'm a jock. I'm a whatever. And that begins to whatever greater or lesser degree, isolate themselves from their family, right? And isolate themselves from others and isolate themselves from people who aren't that. Because that's the thing, is it just grows.
Yeah.
First it's your family's gone, then it's this and it's that, right? And the scripture says the selfish person isolates himself. The selfish man isolates himself. It says this in Proverbs. So that selfishness, that identity of self, right? If we can use a nice buzzword, narcissism, that's what pulls people. So the way to heal that, and the way a person's healed of that, is by, actually turning into and leaning into the larger identification with community. So on a low level, it's family, right? That kid needs to realize that you're part of actually a family, right? And you find your identity, your true place in the context of that family, right? And that actually this is my family. No, actually you've rejected your family to have what you think is a family, but it's just a greater extension of yourself, right? It's a greater reflection of yourself. It's curated, right? It's a curated self. So you can see this process then when you begin to, zoom out, and you can now see this in the light of gender, in the light of, ethnicity, in the light of nationality, all these things. Because there's always this level where you say, okay, this is enough. I've expanded enough. And it's like, and it's at that point, you are now facing another temptation of idol. Okay. Then Christ pulls it out and zooms it out even further. Is this making sense?
Yeah, because the saints embrace the whole world.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Christ embraces the whole world.
Correct. And that's why when people want to make arguments, which sound convincing because they're erudite and they have certain language, but the reality is full stop. No, because Christ embraces the whole world, and that's what the saints do. They pray for the whole world. So there is no limit. And the second that you say that there is a limit, the second that you stand on some sort of, dogmatic disposition that there is a limit, you've lost it. And you've lost Christ, and you've turned, God forbid, you've taken the cross, you've gilded it and made it an idol, So I think this is important, because the radical nature of the first Christians is what we need to turn to. And we found it in the Romanian saints. And what will it look like for us? But I think for us in America, because we are built on being a nation that curated itself. This is the thing, is I'm not interested in trying to recover some lost Christian roots. They're not there. I'm interested on discovering what God would have for us. That's the difference, because what we are is a pluralistic nation, for better or for worse. And it's in understanding that versus some sort of revisionist curated past. It's God can save the multi-figured mess that we are. he can't, save the false, pure, idealized, enlightenment, thing that you think we were, So, I hope that all this, because from my perspective, I see the through line through everything we've talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope, for others, it can maybe give some insight and some encouragement to actually, lean into, Christ and the cross in a new way, because it's true. And his cross does heal us and will heal us and will heal those. I mean, the cross is the tree of life, and that tree of life has fruit, fruits for the healing of the nations, plural. This is the revelation,
Yeah. May be blessed. May we get there. Well, thank you, Father, for chatting today. Can you tell us about Synaxis?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's my joy to be with you. Yeah, please. I have started this community. It's kind of digital online community, Synaxis of Sophia, and it's maybe you could even say, but I think it's a real blessing. It's going really well. It's filled with just great interactions, people encouraging one another. It's I released these sections, these previews of these interviews that I'm doing, but the full interviews are released fully there in the Synaxis, and there's the classroom where I just have a bunch of teachings and catechism. There's a lot there, but more importantly, there's good people there, and there's goodwill there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a place where for people to get off of the toxicity of X and all these other platforms, but still kind of scratch the itch of social media and have some interaction, but
Mm-hmm.
it's edifying. And it people want to be there. So, please, maybe you'll put a link there, but I would encourage anyone to, come and check it out, join, if you don't like it, you can get out. But, I think
I went in with that attitude, if I'm honest. I was like, okay, well, I'll try it. I don't need one more thing in my life. But I got off of other things because I'm trying to be careful. Time is limited, and it's been I've been actually really shocked at the difference it makes to just have it, because it is a paid subscription, but it keeps people out who aren't serious.
yeah.
So that's really the key. And I think it's been fantastic. A lot of conversation, a couple hundred people, chatting with each other and helping and encouraging. So yeah.
Yeah. And people are meeting, and I'm just going to say this here formally, working on having this conference on, mental health and addictions and passions and spiritual life, working on this in-person conference. So,
okay. I don't know if you saw the poll, but I was the only one that said no. It was like 70 people said yes. So, okay, I have to go now, but
yeah, please, maybe you'll be a speaker. So,
is it for mental health professionals or is it for anybody?
No,
I guess I was confused about that.
It's going to be for anybody, because guess what? That's part of the problem, is that just mental health professionals, you get in there and then everyone's just wanting to kind of peacock around, and I'm not interested in that. It's really going to be, yes, it's going to have these emphasis, but everybody's either a godparent or a godchild. Everyone has children. Everyone's in the life of the church or wants to be in the church. So it's going to be applicable to everybody. And this is part of, I think, what's going to be where it's going to be not just a good draw, but where people hopefully will get benefit from it, is that it's going to be from a disposition of experience, but also, expectation. No one's going to be there thinking that they have all the answers. Experts are going to quote unquote present, and we're going to discuss, we're going to talk about how things maybe need to function in parish life and in family life, so that our mental and spiritual health as a body is going to be, more in the likeness and image of God versus the likeness and image of what, the secular mental health professionals tell us, because they don't have the archetype of Christ. Mm-hmm. And so that's the big thing, is methods are one thing, methodology is one thing, but the end point is really what we want to put the focus on. And I feel, and we feel, those in, in my community, and my spiritual children who are mental health professionals, we all agree that this is the core problem, is that, the icon of Christ as the means for healing is, to be frank, consciously obfuscated from in mental health. And whether that's because clinicians are scared because they'll lose their job because of, the dispositions of various agencies and administrative policies in regards of, to be frank, a very clear rejection of Christ. Whether it's people don't understand, they don't know how mental health, quote unquote, counseling, quote unquote, spirituality, how they actually do and can interface in such a way to lead people to a clear icon of Christ in their lives. This is what we're trying to actually address. And it can be because we're coming from a place of actual experience. I think I'll just say this much, and forgive me for hijacking it, but, when I'm not speaking about from books, no problem quoting books, speaking from experience of people who have been, again, disfigured and broken, who are now walking in the light of Christ. So I think this alone is why it's going to be important, because everyone that's going to be speaking is going to be speaking from that place of experience, of seeing people in that resurrectional life. So.
Well, that's what I needed 30 years ago. Maybe I still need it, but I don't know if you know this about me, but my mom was severely mentally ill. She got every diagnosis in the book, but she, everything from multiple personality to PTSD, bipolar, schizophrenic, schizoaffective, down the list. And she got sick when I was about 11. It came out then, and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. And so much of my young adult life was because I converted at 18 and moved away from home to get out of that situation. But so much of those early years were exactly about that. Trying to navigate, all of that dysfunction that you learn. And now you're Orthodox and some of the words are the same. So that's confusing, So it was really Metropolitan Jonah. He was here in California at that time, and a friend of ours that really helped me through his different
Amen.
papers and, retreats and confession and stuff.
Well,
but
this is great, because you just told me I'll definitely need to make sure, with a blessing, that Vladika is one of the speakers, and
yeah,
I'm going to make sure that you're there.
Okay, fine. I would love to come. I'll have to change my vote. I was too cowardly to change my vote after I took a stance. So
we can always make U-turns, right? That's repentance.
Can always repent.
That's great.
All right. Well,
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you again, Father. Okay, take care, everyone.